And I
Cool.
think we are live. Yes.
Yeah, we're
Just press the
officially live.
Go live button.
Well, thank you both so much for joining us.
Yeah.
Well, thanks
Again.
for having us. We really appreciate, all the effort that, it takes a lot of work to do something like this. So we very much appreciate the effort and the time that you've put in. And yeah, that's cool.
Thanks. Same goes for your documentary.
Oh, yeah. This is nothing compared to that.
That's way more effort. Yeah.
Well, I don't know. What episode number are you at now? You're in the 800s, right? Mid 800s?
I think
We're in the 300s.
300.
300s? Okay.
Yeah.
Well, okay. I mean, that's a lot, like it's amazing, to sort of keep going each and every week, like that's amazing. And I'm super envious too. I'm like, oh, it's like working out, right? Like I always want to have like a consistent deadline, and like working out, I don't do that. So, I this doesn't need to turn into a therapy session for me.
Thanks.
All right. So we, just in case anybody isn't aware, we just watched your documentary, Follow the Bones, which is all about Al Lakusta and Pachyrhinosaurus lakustai, I think is how they kind of combine the and I think, right? They don't say lakusta I, but yeah, awesome documentary. It talks a lot about Phil Curry and Ava Koppelhuis, who are like two of our favorite paleontologists too. So yeah,
couple goals, right?
We have a couple of questions that came up already from the people we did the watch party with on our Discord server. So first up,
I'm nervous.
Yeah,
I just gotta say, I'm very nervous. I'm nervous, first of all, that people liked it, but I'm also nervous. Your podcast is you go deep, right?
Yeah.
And so I should have turned on the air conditioning or something.
So
you're surrounded by snow. You'll be.
Yeah, that's true.
The first three questions we have are kind of softballs. So it's not like, hey, what do you think about this classification of this dinosaur compared to this
we
other
already
one?
We already did an interview with you. So.
Yeah. So the first question from Morgan is, has the experience made you guys want to do more dinosaur documentaries?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, it was a real, like we said in the interview, we didn't really know what we were getting into, and the focus of the documentary changed significantly. I loved being out in the field. It's just so much fun. Well, actually, you know what? Fun's not the word. Like when you go on a trip and you only remember the good things. And you forget the things like you were delayed, or you forget all the bad things. So I'm only remembering the good things, and I loved it. Now, Tara, you weren't as keen, no? Do you want to say? No.
Well, I liked it, but yeah, I found not being close to hospitals a little nerve-wracking, because you're really remote, and if something happens, like, you could easily get lost, and people could not find you. I mean, there's no cell phone reception, and so that part, yeah, I felt a little bit nervous about being so off the grid a little bit, but it was amazing. I mean, for me, what was the takeaway was just the commitment of the community, and in terms of citizen science, and I found it really fascinating. I'm an artist, so I'm used to not getting paid for doing stuff, and it's a labor of love, right? In terms of art, but it's the same with paleontology in a lot of ways. Like, it kind of surprised me, because we always think like, oh, science gets all the money or something, but it's definitely not true. And in order to make those discoveries, it requires a lot of volunteer help and a lot of just kind of labor. So that I was excited about just getting to know the community. That was kind of the best part. And then the visuals of being out there, but I don't know. Maybe we could try again. At least now I know what I was up against.
That's true.
Yeah.
Well, you could do a dinosaur documentary that doesn't involve being in remote Alberta.
Right.
True. That might be more my Yeah, that might be more my way to go.
Yeah.
But I loved being in the field. I thought it was. I mean, I'm a real rookie camper, so I just tried to pretend that I knew what I was doing, and then and kind of hope that no one would notice. But yeah, that was kind of my experience. Is just kind of fake it till you make it sort of thing.
Did anyone notice?
Probably. They're
Probably.
too polite.
They are
They're
very polite.
Canadians.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, they're too polite. So yeah, they were probably. I'm sure they're telling stories like, "Oh my God, did you see the representation of that draw? It didn't have a horn. It had a horn. It didn't." So yeah. So I'm sure they're talking about me. Well, I mean, hopefully you want people to talk about you, right? So
That's true. Wait, so real quick, you said they're polite because they're Canadian, but you guys are both Canadian too, right?
Oh yeah, it's like it's a politeness
It's
sort
like
of
a thing,
circular firing squad, but with like compliments.
Yeah.
No, you go first. No, you go first.
Yeah, quickly say,
you
"Oh,
go
I'm
first.
sorry.
Oh,
Excuse me,
sorry. Pardon me.
Sorry."
Don't-
We were flying back from Canada one time, and I was chuckling quietly to myself, and I told Sabrina later, I heard 30 people, or approximately 30 people, interact, and the only word I heard was sorry, because it was like, excuse me was sorry, and then like people would say like sorry as a response, and it was amazing.
Yeah. Oh, wow.
Yeah, exactly.
Stereotypes,
It's not a bad stereotype. That's
Yeah,
a good
that's
one
true.
to
Yeah.
embrace.
It's true.
So the follow-up question to that one was, have you found any stories that you'd like to tell? Maybe, I guess this could be dinosaurs or otherwise other stories you're interested in.
I mean, that's a great question. Because, when you're a documentary filmmaker or, Tara's an artist, you're kind of, and I'm sure it's the same with the two of you, right? You're constantly looking for other stories to tell. Now, it may not be overt. You're not like at a party going, taking secret notes, because that'd be weird. But, I think, was it Nora Ephron said, everything is kind of copy. Now, well, when we were out in the field, a couple of the other paleontologists were like, hey, I'm doing this thing, you want to come and, join us? And I'm like, absolutely, I do. So, you when you're a filmmaker, and again, the same with the two of you, you're dependent on kind of the generosity of other people to share their story. And that, it's you need to respect that, and you need to. The other thing too is you need to like build the trust, and yeah. So, does that kind of make sense?
Well, yeah, part of the trip we met Hans Larsen, another, well-known paleontologist, and he is the director of the Redpath Museum in Montreal, which is a beautiful little museum. So we're interested in maybe doing something on the museum and have already done a little bit of legwork on it. And it was, again, really great to just see and find out about the projects that Hans is working on. So that's definitely, yeah, that could, takes a while for these things to happen, but yeah, that could turn into something, I think.
And as a benefit, you don't have to go back out far from any hospitals to do that one.
True.
Although he's doing stuff in the Arctic, so I don't know.
Oh yeah.
He's got some projects in the Arctic that sounded pretty cool. But...
That would be worth it just to say that you've been to Antarctica. That would be awesome.
Mm.
Or Arctic or Antarctic?
I thought
It's in the Arctic.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, the easier one.
Yeah. I mean, it's just 20 minutes from us, so that's a joke. But no, we're you're very much you're a guest, right? So when we went on the shoot, Eva said, you got to bring your own water, you got to bring your own food, and and then something as simple as batteries, because where we filmed is completely off the grid, and when you go into the valley, it's all bentonite. So if it rains, you're not getting out, and you're not getting out for days, right? So, something as simple as batteries for the camera. I looked into, all right, if I rent a generator, how much does this cost? And how heavy is it? I got to lug it in myself. Can I carry a generator and my camera gear? the answer is no, but so all of this stuff, you're sort of like relying on the generosity of the team, and they're super great. Now, you have to build up that trust. Like Phil's really well-known paleontologist, and he gets people coming up to him all the time. And I think when you're a public figure, it can be difficult at times because you get people, like, "Hey, Phil, how's it going?" But little by little, we got to know him, and he's really generous with his time ultimately. Yeah.
Nice.
I don't know if that answered the question.
I think so.
Yeah.
That you've got more stories than you know what to do with is probably the summary.
Yeah. I mean, and I mean, that's the other reason why I think it's a good question is when you're kind of, I hate the word creator. It sounds so pompous, but when you're like make stuff like a filmmaker or an artist or a designer or podcaster, the ideas, where the ideas come from isn't the hard part. The hard part is like putting in the labor, putting in the work when you're doing an edit and it's kind of late and you'd rather just like watch something on Netflix or something like that. It's that sort of late. Tara's rolling her eyes. I can see you rolling your eyes. I'm right here. I know. Boo-hoo for me. Like I get to make a documentary and woe is me. No, I don't want to sound like a big baby, but I mean, there you go. I am.
that might warrant some follow-up questions. So we have another question. This one's from Paleo Mike. He asked, are there any stories or parts of the story that you had to cut? And I know after we finished recording last time, I don't know if this is one you want to share, but you had a story about like a minor catastrophe that you had to avoid.
Yeah, definitely. Well, first of all, I forget. Sorry, who asked that question?
Paleo Mike.
Paleo Mike.
Yeah.
Well, Paleo Mike. That's an excellent question. Because as you know, with making podcasts, when you're making a story, it's weird being a documentary filmmaker and being on a small little crew. Like actually the couple of times the crews were pretty big. There was like 30 people, but still. You're the person standing around with a camera. So they're having lunch and dinner and what do you do? Do you film them? Because that's super weird. And then you're trying to like film, but you're also trying to build a bond where you're not like the creepy person in the corner filming everything. So you really do miss a lot. And and also, I don't know if I'm shy, like I'm kind of a loudmouth goofball, but I think fundamentally, I'm kind of a little bit of an introvert in that you don't want to be always filming. Now, I wish I was always filming because we missed lots of stuff. So for example, Hans was digging up, there's this beautiful ginkgo leaf deposit, and it was on the side of a cliff. And to get down, we had to scooch down on our butts, toboggan style. So we're like, up. But at that point, I wasn't filming because I was trying, not to die. Because there was like
priorities.
Yes, sinkholes on one side and then the cliff on the other. But I'm like, darn it! I wish I would have filmed that because it would have communicated just how difficult it is to get down to this part where they were digging. Because when you film it, you're like, oh, it's a little hill. Boo-hoo, you big baby. But there was other times where they were excavating in Grand Prairie. They've excavated there for years and years and years and years and years now. And they've kind of got out of the bone bed what they could. So while I was there, they were bringing in this giant excavator, and it was bananas. They had to like drive it up this dry creek bed. There's no road. And it's like, and then, they brought it up and they were digging out over the bone bed, and Phil was like, he was watching, because they want to get close, but they don't want to damage the bone bed. Mm-hmm. But the hill above it is all it's all kind of glacier muck, right? And so essentially at lunch, the giant excavators up there wiggling this giant hill above us, wiggle. And the science people will know what that leads to. It's called liquefaction. So at lunch, I was filming and I put my camera down because I don't want to be the weird guy, filming at lunch. And so I'm on one side of the bone bed and it's about 100 feet across. and I hear, run. And I look up and I'm like, what? And so when someone says run, you really should just run, right? You don't assess the situation, just run. There was only one way to run. So I ran across, and then I noticed I left my camera in the middle of the bone bed. So I ran back, and they're like, no. And I'm like, boop, 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 boop. Anyways, the whole sort of hill kind of slumped down and covered the bone bed again. And it was like, I mean, I don't know how much mud kind of came down, but it was like a big, like, there would be no getting you out of that mud. And it
Good thing you ran.
Yeah. But of course, I didn't unfortunately film that, right? And that would have been super cool. So I think, for me, this is our first kind of feature length documentary. I'd love in the future, like if I get the opportunity to do something like this again, I think I would be a little more bold and try to like film a little more. And I think I have to get over my ego, and nobody cares if I'm filming, right? You kind of invisible, and it's all in my head. So if I was to do it again, I would definitely film more, because I don't know if we nailed setting the scene about what it's like to kind of be on a dig. And I wish we would have maybe painted that a little more.
I feel like you did a really good job, because you started with the camping, and then the part that really stood out to me was you had Eva, and she's like just covered in plaster, and she's like, I don't mind a little dirt, and it's like, but she's like, Eva, this is not a little dirt, you are caked in plaster.
And then she also says, a shower once in a while would be nice. But
I feel like that's pretty appropriate. And you also have like the long walks, like that's a lot of it is just like trekking for a long ways.
There is a lot of walking. Yes. But yeah, and we would we'd go swimming in the Red Deer River, which is, the camp is right beside it. And it's not super deep, but it's the bottom of the valley. So I swear you come out dirtier than when you go in. It feels nice, but it's a muddy river, and you kind of come out and you're like, I'm a little gritty, but
it's a different dirt. You're changing the dirt.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's a good question, though. I hope I answered it.
I'm glad they asked that, because I wanted to get that piece of information out there. I love that story. Yep. So let's see.
Any more from the Discord?
Follow-up is if there... Oh, okay. I think we already answered this follow-up. Oh, here we go. How many snakes or hazards did you find in the field? Yes. Also from Paleo Mike.
Again, Paleo Mike... I suspect Paleo Mike actually knows what he's talking about and may have been in the field. Paleo Mike, have you put in the chat if you've actually been out there? Because clearly that there are some hazards. Someone
got bit by a scorpion.
Someone got bit by a scorpion. One of the students, and it was a minor bite, but it was like talk of the group. And again, they said watch out for rattlesnakes. And I would hit. There's a lot of sagebrush. And I'm not a science person, but if you hit it, it has the seed pods kind of sound like a rattlesnake, and it's some kind of defense mechanism, right? So so of course I walk over the brush, and I hear this, and I'm like, oh no, of course it's just they were like, haha, you stepped on the, they did have a few laughs at my expense, but I did some dumb things like. There was mountain lion tracks just outside of camp, and there was like packs of coyotes going through, and they're harmless. But the first time I went on my own, and I think I told you this story where, I could hear the pack. They were pretty close, and I was like, good thing. But I was sheepish the first time I went, so I put my tent quite a bit away from the main camp because I didn't want to be the weirdo. I mean, it was probably weirder.
Probably more weird.
Probably...
I wasn't on that trip.
Yeah.
You would have talked him out of it.
I would have said, no, we should be with the people.
But of course,
weird to separate yourself.
Yeah, it was weird. But you try to. This is the thing. You try not to be a weirdo, and then the next thing you know, you're like the weirdo.
You're overthinking it.
Exactly.
Totally. But anyways, so I was in my tent. It was like, I don't know. It was early, like quite late, probably early in the morning. And I was like, well, good thing I don't have any food in my tent. And then I felt around, and I was like, uh-oh, I got a salami sandwich at the bottom of my tent.
Oh no.
And so, first of all, delicious, but also like it's a smelly sandwich, right? So of course, again, overthinking it, I was like, ruh-roh. So I ate it. I was like, I better deal with it. I mean, I don't want the coyote to get my sandwich, but also like, I don't want them to, I don't know. Anyways, I don't, what was even the question?
The hazards.
It's the hazards. Yeah.
We weren't there, but the week before the one trip, someone had fallen and like their leg. I don't know if they broke their leg, but they had to kind of get carried out.
Yeah. So if the thing with the valley is it's not like climbing Everest or something like that, but it is effort and time and field work time is wildly precious, especially in Canada. It's a very short season. Mm-hmm. So, but the biggest thing they mentioned, well, there was a rattlesnake colony, and there was like an abandoned cabin from the 19th century. And it apparently had a large rattlesnake colony. But the biggest thing for me was the sinkholes. The sinkholes, because it's, and I don't know the specific nitty gritty, but the valley is formed and it's constantly eroding. And because I guess of the bentonite or whatever, there's these sinkholes. And you think, oh, sinkhole, but like basically they're human-sized holes that go down, and I would like drop stuff down and I wouldn't hear it. Now probably hit mud, but still, like they said if you're in, like you're kind of pooched, right? So people had whistles. So if you do, if something bad happens, but then the one paleontologist mentioned that it depends which way the wind's blowing. If you're blowing your whistle and you're off, like you might not be heard. And there's no, obviously there's no cell reception and stuff like that. So you're used to a certain amount of connectivity in kind of like cities and stuff, even non-cities, even in rural places. But it's truly, it's a bit of it's kind of a surprise to be so off the grid, when you're not used to it.
Mm-hmm.
But you would walk out and, like there'd be the sinkhole, you'd be trying to get down and you kind of go one way, and then it would almost be like crossing a bridge, and it would sort of be these sinkholes on either side. And then sometimes you get to the end and you couldn't get down that way, and you'd have to go back and then try another way. So because of and just because it would be like kind of a cliff. So, you couldn't really walk down that part, and you didn't really know. So you just have to kind of keep maneuvering kind of zigzag to find the way down. And then there's one, I think we used the shot where we were coming down the one time and you could see this cattle, like, the skeleton, like the head, and you're like, what do you think happened there? Yeah, Carrie's like, I think that guy fell.
So most of it's ranch land currently, and so you get the paleontologists get permission by the ranch owners to dig. But like every once in a while, a cow will, kind of stray off and fell down a sinkhole. And then, we saw a few of those where you kind of see it come out the bottom end, right? So anyways, it's like, it's bananas to be like in a part, we're talking a little mostly about Dinosaur Provincial Park. And I was saying in the interview, what's weird about when you're walking around is that like when you're around the parts that wash out, you're going crunch, 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 and you look down and it's bone fragments. It's thousands and thousands and thousands of tiny bone fragments that you're walking on. And so it's pretty profound to be there. Like it's quite quiet. There is some grass, but there's no trees. And because of when you're in the valley, the sound really gets absorbed. So it's very, I don't know what, it's pretty peaceful, but also you're kind of alone there with your thoughts, and you're also surrounded by a lot of dead animals. I forget how many. I think is it 10 million? I'm sorry. In the valley, there's like essentially 10 million years of animals from the top of the cliff to the bottom. And that's a lot of dead animals, and that's why there's so many bones. There's just so much history in this little sort of cross section. Anyways, I don't know if I answered the question. I'm a real
Well,
poet.
other parts are other digs we were on are like we did one that was more, I think, closer to Edmonton, where it's really weird because you like go by the mall and then you're off the and it's so close to things too. So both extremes actually, which is kind of fascinating.
For the ones that are like by the mall, when you are on the dig site, does it feel like you're by a mall, or does it feel like you're in a whole different place?
Yeah, you can't really see you can't quite see the kind of suburbia and the malls and that. So yeah, you definitely feel that you're, it feels off the beaten track, but you do kind of know that you can. Yeah, I don't know. I remember we were like, "Oh, we better go get some water," and then we just like went out for half an hour and then came back.
It was super convenient. But the suburban ones, they are hidden, and this is one thing that they do. They if you wanted to find one, yeah, sure, you could find it, but they are covered up and hidden because there is there's vandalism issues. Just people horsing around sort of thing. So if you walked, it was like walking on a path through like a bush, right? Sort of northern forest. If you could walk by the bone bed and just think there's a pit, and you would never know that there was something in there. So that's interesting too. The bone beds are funny because like even at Pipestone Creek, you go to the bone bed and you kind of look around and you're like, that's it, so they're not the prettiest thing in the world. So that's also interesting in that the bone beds, like you're in a northern forest, and now there's different hazards. In the north, they were like, watch out for bears, and there was bears in the area. Like there was signs saying,
everywhere
there's bears.
A lot of bears.
I was more concerned with the mountain lions. So, because the bears might stumble across you, but the mountain lions, they're like, that guy looks a little soft, So yeah, there's different hazards in different places.
That's true.
Yeah.
The one dig we went to was in Two Medicine, which is pretty close to Alberta. It's just on the Montana side of the border. And we were out on this hill, and you could see Glacier National Monument like in the distance. It was a beautiful place to be digging. But one of them mentioned, you see that like creek down there? That's the densest population of grizzly bears,
wow,
like in North America or something. There's like they've counted 40 bears or something. It's like a couple dozen acres or something. And we're like, oh, well, that's cool. And then we saw a bear track. Remember that? There was like a bear track like while we were walking, and they're like, oh, it just rained yesterday. I guess there was a bear here within the last 24 hours. Like, oh, cool.
Yep.
The tracks are scary. The scat is scarier.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
Because you're like,
fresher.
Oh, yeah, that's
Yeah, when it's steaming. That's when you're like, oh boy.
Too soon.
True.
Totally.
But like I said, Eva is in charge of the camp, and she runs a tight ship, like she's making sure everyone's sort of safe. And when you're in Dinosaur Provincial Park, you have to let people know if you're leaving camp, if you're going out for a walk or whatever, and that sort of thing. And so I mean, we it's not as dangerous as I don't know, I'm maybe saying, but I'm saying this as a non-camper. Every little twig snap, I'm like, what was that? What was that?
Especially when it's so quiet too.
Yeah.
I can imagine. Yeah. So that question, Paleo Mike is Michael in the chat here, and he said, I've heard stories. So earlier. We've got some questions from
I got another one here.
Oh, we've got, okay.
Okay. So I think you answered this a little bit in the documentary, but Elrex asked if you found fossils of other animals besides dinosaurs. So I know there's you mentioned the cow, which I guess wouldn't technically be a fossil, not dead long enough. You have the Pachyrhinosaurus, but there was also, in addition to that dinosaur, you had the Parasaurolophus. You showed the jacket flipping on. And I guess you mentioned ginkgo, but that's not an animal. So anyway.
Certainly there was, it was a strange way to Al's story has been told many times, and the stories in the past. So when we were in Pipestone, they were pulling out all kinds of stuff, and then again, they're actually opening up new sites around Grand Prairie, and I think they found a Troodon. Now I wasn't there for that, but for example, I was interviewing one of the grad students, and he looked down and he's like, "Hey, there's a T-Rex tooth," and he picked it up and he threw it to me. And like that's kind of shows how plentiful it is in Dinosaur Provincial Park. And it was no big deal. It was like the end of the tooth. The teeth they fragment when they hit the air after a while. But there was like what's the I can't say it.
Parasaurolophus.
That's the one. So that's the one where they flip the jacket. And honestly, like I was saying on the podcast, I said to Phil, like it's impressive. But as Tara's an artist, and I found the craft of the jacket building kind of super fascinating. But the dinosaur just kind of looked like a beat up old Volkswagen car. And so I said to Phil, I was like, and I'm trying to be delicate about it, right? And I'm like, is this a thing? Is this one important in the nicest sort of way? And he was like, yeah, this is a big deal. This is the biggest one that's been found in the park. And the other thing too is when you go to the museums, particularly in the back, there's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of jackets, and from decades ago that haven't been opened up. So I was like, is this one gonna what happens to the jackets, and how do they decide which one to open up, right? And it's the scientist's specialization, and but Phil said, yeah, we're gonna open this one up right away. And then outside of Edmonton, the bone bed there, they were finding what was that? Oh boy, I'm sorry, I forget the name of the animal that was out there. It's the one. It's a big herbivore, but they found a bone bed there, and there was all kinds of giant, sort of enormous ribs, and they were finding them left and right. And again, ribs are the most common fossil that people are finding, but there was all kinds of T-Rex teeth in there, like just tons and tons. It was a little smorgasbord, when the poor little fellas. But that's the one where I think we were both there, and you're like, this hasn't been unearthed in like millions and millions of years. And that's a thing when you're there is I goof around a lot, but it does strike you that these were animals, and they lived and they died before humans were even like, an idea, and that's sort of, that's pretty striking when you like it makes you feel insignificant, and rightly so, perhaps, right? But yeah, so I have a real knack for not answering questions. I'm really sorry if I'm, yeah, sorry. Is there, yeah.
I think we've had some other questions.
I think you did answer the question.
Yes,
but...
other fossils. The answer is they were all dinosaurs, it sounds like.
Except for, Eva was definitely, as a paleobotanist, she was there gathering, now she showed us, like, she was like, as a paleobotanist, my work takes sometimes like 5 minutes. She goes and gets some dirt and puts it in a vial, and then she looks for pollen, when she gets back at the lab. So she said, in a lot of ways, as a paleobotanist, her, obviously she's always looking for, a fuller specimen, but most of the time it's pollen and that sort of thing. So, but the ginkgos, when they opened up the ginkgos, and the ginkgos, like, they were jackhammering off the mud, and they would whack them, and in every sort of chunk, the chunks were like this big, in every one there was like this beautifully preserved ginkgo leaf. It looks like
awesome.
It looked like it fell off the tree, like, maybe 2 autumns ago,
Wow.
So that was pretty cool.
That is.
So yeah.
That is great. Yeah, that's one of those things where it's like you don't appreciate it unless you have someone there that knows how important it is.
Yeah.
And I feel like a lot of botany is probably missed out in the field by people that are only looking for the dinosaur bones.
Yeah. But yeah, and and everybody, everybody in the team, prospecting is kind of the most fun thing. So everybody kind of wants to wander around and, like, find stuff. And I kind of stepped in it a few times. Like I didn't quite know the protocol. So I was with a bunch of grad students and I looked down and I looked at this bone and it looked like basically, it looked like Kentucky Fried Chicken sort of thing, right? So I picked it up and I'm like, hey, yo, so and so, and I was in the motion, and he's like, don't throw it. But of course, at that moment, I threw the bone, and he caught it. Luckily, I didn't, but it ended up being like this really beautiful T-Rex knuckle. They think.
Oh,
And it was
wow.
only one little part, but he was like, don't throw stuff anymore. And I was like, okay, note to self, no throwing bones. That's a no.
Don't throw stuff.
I know.
Well, I can see how that's confusing when before
You're like,
someone
but we're
taught.
outside. That's an indoor rule. We can throw stuff.
Well,
out
also
here.
somebody tossed you a T-Rex tooth before, so
This is true. To my defense,
He did it.
yeah.
I mean, he was a pro, and I think because it was so well preserved, it really, I mean, ultimately, it kind of looked like a human knuckle, like a section of a finger, and it was fresh as a daisy. Now it was in a washout, and when stuff washes out like that, it's not super useful because this might have washed out 5,000 years ago, sort of thing, right? Some of these washes, they haven't been seen by people, but this probably happened a long, long time ago. So the prospectors are more looking for things that are embedded in the in the rock or in the sort of, it's almost more like mud a lot of times. But yeah. But they're all keen on, it's a little competitive. Like it's got, the boys are all like, I'm going to go the furthest away from the entire group to try to find something. Because they all want to, and if you do find something, it can really, if you're a grad student, you find make a significant find. That's a big deal for your career,
Yeah.
So that's why the gang is like, they're all running all over the place, and then the group leaders will have to kind of call them back and say, okay, we've had our fun. Now it's time to like dig for like 4 hours and, put in the labor.
Did you guys have like radios or anything?
No, that would have been smart.
Because that's one of those things you could use without cell phone towers. But
Yeah. I'm sure the main group did, but when you're a filmmaker, you also got to balance like how much money you can put into this, right? Like our budget was essentially, we're very modest. So, we rented most of the camping gear. So it was like, relatively inexpensive, but we did, they did ask us, the one time they said, okay, if you're coming to camp, here's what you got to get. You got to get chicken for the group. And we were like, how many people are in the group? And they were like 30. So we were like, how much chicken do we have to buy? So we bought and they're like, and we need 2 bottles of rum and, 60 beers. And so, some apples. So we were like the grocery, which was fine. We were happy to bring all the goodies and kind of pay our dues. You know what I mean?
That's a really funny combination. Chicken, apples, rum, and
It
beer.
makes perfect sense to me. You got protein, you got fruit, you got your alcohol.
The 3 major foods.
Yeah. It's the pyramid, Yeah.
That is great. All right. Did you have we've got this fancy thing where we can make questions show up on the screen.
Oh, should we show them?
Yeah, we should make this one
All
show
right,
up.
here we go.
Yeah. What's your favorite dinosaur?
Boy, that's a tough one. I gotta say, I'm sorry about the Pachyrhinosaurus, but it might not be the Pachyrhinosaurus. I'm like, it kind of just looks like a rhinoceros. No offense to rhinos. Obviously, okay. So here's a good question for the group. I do wonder, as the dinosaurs are gaining more and more feathers, do you think dinosaurs will still be kind of a thing if they just kind of turn out to be enormous chickens? You know what I mean? Like, so for example, we have one shot of it. Unfortunately, we didn't film it enough, probably, in the archive of the TRL. And it's this giant raptor. It's just beautifully preserved. And you're like, that's a giant chicken. And So anyways,
So you were being that boy from Jurassic Park where he's like, that just looks like a 6-foot turkey.
they kind of do, but like at the Tyrrell they've unearthed, what was it, they got Hellboy there now. And that's a pretty one. Like the ones with the frills and the spikes are always fun. Like they're the entertaining ones. And I think as a kid, I was like, and I don't even know if it's called this anymore, is Stegosaurus, with the little spikes on the back.
Yeah, that's a fun one.
When I was a kid, I love that. And everyone likes the sauropods. Now they're not in Alberta, so there's none there. So, but yeah, I like I said, like the way we did this documentary, we started it. The documentary was originally about the museum and kind of incidentally about the dinosaurs. And then obviously the story about the dinosaurs is more interesting than a story about a museum. So it kind of turned into that. But for us, like, and I think Phil even mentioned this, in what inspired him to become a paleontologist was the All About Dinosaurs by Roy Chapman Andrews. And he said the reason why that one really inspired him is that it wasn't about the dinosaurs. It was about the paleontologists. And so for us, like, or at least for me, the most interesting thing are the scientists themselves. They're just relentlessly curious. And then this also goes for the amateur scientists, the volunteers. Like they're just so, I don't know, eager to sort of explore the world and understand kind of humans' place in it. And that's pretty kind of amazing. So for me, like, I got to say the characters, like, Al's like this, he's a funny guy. He was like, you know what, if I didn't find it, somebody else would have found it, and he literally said that. And that's probably true. But because he was a middle school teacher, he knew what he was looking at when he found these bones. And he knew that and also he knew basically the bones were on the creek bed and then they stopped, right? So he followed them, and he knew that if they stop, it wasn't just random. If it was me finding them, first of all, I never would have noticed. But I went to put 2 and 2 together and thought, they've stopped here. Why did they stop? And then he looked up, and that's the sort of the, that, and again, another long-winded way of not answering the question.
You did say Stegosaurus as a kid.
Yeah.
Yes. So,
Tara, do you have one?
Well, I'm partial to owls, like once now that I know the story, and then, and they have the babies, and and to kind of, and to be in that space where, it really illuminated it for me. And then to see Darren, like how excited he was about horned dinosaurs. I don't know. I kind of, I think I'm pretty much about those dinosaurs now that I know so much about them. Well, not so much, but more than before, which was nothing. So
I did see too that one description of Pachyrhinosaurus lakustai is that they describe it as like a unicorn because it's got a horn sort of above its eyes. So if you're into unicorns, that would be a good dinosaur choice.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd be all about the magic. Any magical dinosaurs. That kind of dinosaur.
Yeah, fair enough,
Rainbows don't fossilize, so we can't tell how magical it was.
All right, we've got another one here. Your thoughts on other prehistoric documentaries, if you've seen any. We've also been watching a lot lately.
We have been watching a lot.
Yeah. I mean, it's a combination of jealousy, envy, and regret when I watch other documentaries. I'm like
all positive emotions.
I think, and I'm sure like, your listeners and yourself, when you make something, you tend to see the flaws and all the issues that are kind of wrong with it. So I mean, I'm a big documentary fan. I worked at the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation for 20 years. I was in the documentary unit. And, I'm not there anymore. And they put out a doc on the, I forget what it's called. It's like a tank and it's got all the spikes. It's really low. And
it might have been on Zool, would be my guess. Probably an ankylosaur of some sort.
That's what it is. It's the, So that was found during oil mining in the north.
Oh, Borealopelta.
Oh, then Boreal,
It's perfect. So, the CBC did something like that. And, when you see other documentary, basically when I see other ones where people got like better access, I'm like, darn it all. But one thing I think that we did get right is that we put in the time with like Al and Darren and
Mhm.
Phil, and that paid off, right? You know, ours might not be the prettiest or whatever, but yeah. So I mean, we love watching documentaries. Now that being said, I do think, you know, like you have the visuals, um, um, that go with documentaries, but I gotta say podcasts in a way, they're a rich sort of media, you know, like in a lot of ways. Like you got to put away some time to watch a documentary, right? But when you know you can listen to a podcast, you can, I don't know, like I always like clean or whatever, and it's, you know,
Not enough.
but that being said, oh well, okay, that was uncalled for.
True.
It is. Yeah, we're both teaching online, so the house is a disaster. But that being said, like, I'm not such a fan of like, there was like one in Canada called Dino Hunters, and Dan Aykroyd did it, and you know, I'm not like, it's fine, but it had a very much like a reality show, like DNA to it, where they'd be like, are they going to find it? Are they going to da 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 ba? And you're like, yeah, they're gonna find it. Like they've already found it, dummy. Like, and so like this sort of, I dislike the fake kind of, you know, what will they get it? You know, or you know, like this, the you know, reality shows kind of have a real flavor. And when we first showed Phil and Eva, they were relieved that it didn't have that flavor, you know, like they were like, all right, you're taking it seriously. You're taking us seriously. You're not like making us look like, you know, Indiana Jones, like, you know, like Phil was one of the models for the Jurassic Park, the Alan Grant's character, along with, who's the other guy?
Jack Horner,
Jack
I think.
Horner, yeah.
It was mostly based on the Jack Horner guy, but you know, Phil was also like, you know, definitely, and we had that in the first cut of the doc, and he's like, could you take that out? And I think just after 20 years, he's tired of talking about it and being the Jurassic Park guy. And he's like, I'm a scientist, kind of like, God damn it, you know, like, not, you know, he didn't say that, I said that, but you know, like I do think that, I don't even know where I was going with that, but you know.
So you like the Borealopelta one, but I would say you can't compare yourself to Borealopelta because that's one of the most beautiful fossils of all time.
True.
Right.
That's like, you know, having that social media syndrome where you're looking at somebody's like beautiful Instagram filtered picture and you're like, why isn't my life like that?
Yeah,
It's like
yeah.
we can't all be Borealopelta. It's okay.
Yeah, exactly. So that's fine, you know. But yeah, our sample was like a beat up old rusted Volkswagen that had been left in a valley, you know. So that poor dinosaur, you know. Anyways, but yeah, I don't know. Did that, you know? Again, like I'm a real all-star at not answering the question. Yeah. Anyways.
Well, the one that, I mean, this is an offshoot. It's not really a documentary, but I was excited. One of my grad students was working on animation and brought up the Gertie animation.
Oh,
the
yeah.
really early one. And I was like, yeah, dinosaurs. People love dinosaurs. Like, that's the first animation, and it was of a dinosaur.
Yeah.
And I just feel like that really captured the kind of imagination and potential and history and the kind of passion that just carries on.
Yeah.
So I love those old ones that are awkward
Well,
and maybe not accurate and like.
Yeah. It was like
At
the
least
first
with animation.
Yeah.
Was that like the first animation? It was like they called it like keyframe animation or something, but
Yeah.
basically first
Yeah.
animation ever, right?
First
Mhm.
animation ever, dinosaur.
Yeah.
Enough
Yeah.
said.
And now that does, like, you know, and I'm sorry, I'm going off, and tell me when to stop, you know, but
Oh, that's
basically,
great.
one thing we did want to capture was Phil spoke about like the dinosaur renaissance, like the first one that was at the end of the 19th century, and then the second one in the 70s. And, you know, like the first one, like the animation that coincided with photography, right? So that's why it was, you know, the first animation. But, you know, like we did want to kind of capture that element, that sort of dinosaur renaissance, and how in the 70s, like there was this, like a lot of universities were founded, or in the 70s, there was this, it wasn't just dinosaurs, it was across science, across the board, where there was this real flowering of knowledge, and it's still, that kind of carried on, so I hope it, hopefully, economically speaking, I'm a little worried that, like the end of the first dinosaur renaissance was because of the depression and the First World War and that. So I'm, like these renaissances do end. So I'm hopeful that, like science will still, I mean, science is giving us a lot. Like the new vaccines are like, they're a miracle, so, I don't know, I'm going on a science sort of tangent, but,
yeah. Hopefully the one good thing about it is nowadays the dinosaur research and the paleontology excavations are happening all over the world. So even if, like even World War I, yeah, we call it World War I, but it didn't really affect Africa. It affected Australia a little bit. It didn't affect East Asia. Yeah. So hopefully that even if there is some other, like big hiccup, there are other people that will maintain the dinosaur research around the world. Yeah. Because back then it was just like, it was like Europeans and Americans basically going everywhere. And then if they stop going to those places, like, yeah, there aren't any new discoveries in Mongolia,
right?
But it's not because, Mongolians.
There's also, I mean, Jurassic World Dominion still has yet to come out, and like all these, and I think there's more, feels like there's more movies and games and all kinds of things coming out that get people excited and bring up this new generation. Yeah, there's
the recent sale of Stan that was like $30 million.
38.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
Wow, that's a lot.
It's so, yeah, but there are enough people that are going to see dollar signs that will. That's the real root of what motivates people, unfortunately.
We did, we would hear like little bits and bobs of like jealousy or envy, like, they'd be like, well, down in Montana or whatever, like there's a constant rivalry, like, they're always like, well, Alberta's dinosaurs are the best preserved, and but they're all mashed, right? Whereas Mongolian dinosaurs, they're just beautiful.
Oh yeah.
So, so there was definitely this sort of, like not rivalry, but like, a little bit of that back and forth, which was sort of sweet to, you felt like saying, your dinosaurs are perfectly fine. They're just a little squished,
Yeah.
So.
That's another good point too, because it's like you need both types, because in China, they're all smashed flat. But they have feathers preserved then, because they can get like, that leaf pressing sort of preservation. Whereas like you say, in Mongolia, you get this 3D, you can, there's the coolest dinosaur, I think maybe ever. The fossil is a Protoceratops and what is it? Velociraptor. They're called the fighting dinosaurs. And they're literally like preserved, like interlocked mid battle. Yeah. And it's like, but it doesn't have the feathers. So we had to find the feathered velociraptorines somewhere else to get that piece of the puzzle. So
cool.
Yeah, I love it. Awesome. So we're coming up on an hour. Do we have any more questions that we want to?
We have
we have some joke questions. Well, we said there aren't going to be any difficult questions. Someone said, like, is Nanotyrannus a valid genus based on the presented evidence?
Which was not covered in the documentary.
The answer is no, it's not valid based on evidence.
I mean, they would bring up here and there. They would be would be like alluding to is Pachyrhinosaurus lakustai a true species unto its own, right? So there was that sort of, and I think they were alluding to this sort of proliferation of species that they said even in the future that there might be this like kind of contraction, like where they're like, well, they're all they're the same species. They were like, I don't know, brothers or sisters or whatever, and you're basing it off of a small sample. So that was a like Darren said, it might not remain like a distinct species. It might revert to something else, and that's perfectly fine. So. I don't quite know what was the question again? There was a question
that was about Nanotyrannus. It's not really I think you're right though. I was looking too at the difference between lakustai and canadensis, I think is the type species. And they look pretty different to me. I don't know a ton, but like one of them has a horn sticking out of its head and the other one doesn't. So it's possible that you find an intermediate one that has like half a horn and you say like, okay, well, this is an adult version or whatever. But yeah, for now, that huge horn, and then the mouth too and the nasal boss are quite a bit different as well. So we're answering the question of, is lakustai a valid genus rather than Nanotyrannosaurus? That's what the documentary was about.
And you're definitely at the edge of our knowledge. Well, you're way past it, but yeah, that's, so yeah, like I said, like we were more focused on like kind of the stories behind everyone, like Darren's story of being like a high school dropout and, running away. And, we had some photos of him, and he's this string bean kind of kid, and then the way that,
actually that we had to cut that out. That was a good story where he basically got on the bus to go meet Phil, and the person was like, what are you doing? Like the bus driver was like, hey kid, what are you doing? Were you running away from home? And he was like, well, would I have a rock hammer if I was running away from home? I'm going to be a paleontologist. And basically she was like, all right, take a seat.
But I think, the reason well, first of all, Darren is key he's the person who kind of stitched it all together. He's like the connective tissue. But the other thing we wanted to, really feature him, first of all, he's I guess the point is, paleontology is accessible to the volunteers like Al, and, it's accessible to like the people who are doing PhDs. But then there's Darren, who like is a really skilled technician and knows the craft of it and works in the lab. So like it kind of takes this wide spectrum of people to really make make it tick. It's not just like the superstars who are like kind of out there. So that's really one thing we wanted to basically say. If it wasn't for Al, it wouldn't have been found. If it wasn't for Darren, it would have been forgotten. And if it wasn't for Phil, it probably wouldn't have had the sort of splash that it had, and Phil's also, he's willing to be wrong, and he would be like, if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. If someone proves that what I'm saying is wrong, so be it. That's what science is all about. So
yeah.
So yeah.
I agree. It is always interesting to me how like some dinosaurs become like a staple. Like everybody knows what Triceratops is. Not that many people know what Pachyrhinosaurus is.
No.
But there's nothing like about Pachyrhinosaurus that's less worthy of attention than Triceratops. It's really people like you guys. You go out there, you make a film about it, you tell the story behind it, and that's what gets people engaged with it and interested in the dinosaur. They can now visualize it, understand the importance, because to paleontologists, they're all equally interesting.
Yeah.
And then to lay people, none of it's interesting until someone tells the story. So, yeah.
Cool.
I think we've got time for one last question. So we've got here, who's the most inspiring person you've interviewed in the documentary and why?
That's a good question. Do you want to go?
Sure. I mean, it's hard to beat Phil and Eva, right? I think because they just have that kind of longevity. And I think for us too, we're husband-wife team that work together on stuff. And so we've, there's a lot of heart there and affinity in terms of, spending your lifetime together working in one research area. And it was really, for me, it isn't even like Phil or Eva, like it's the two of them and how they've managed to kind of carve out this life, right? And because, and especially in academia, like it's not, and I think most jobs probably aren't like that anyways, that your job and then there's your life or whatever, right? Like it's just one big thing of stuff you do. So, and I think for me just to like, as a woman and then to hear Eva's, side as well. And that to hear kind of the paleobotany and how important like that really gets overlooked because it doesn't have the just the scale of the dinosaurs, and maybe it doesn't capture people's imagination in the same kind of way, but that it actually gives you the ecosystem, and that's the kind of material that could help us learn things about now. So I think for me, getting to meet them and see yeah, all those small things, like how they managed their groups, and then like the coordination of bringing in students and then combining other paleontologists and combining volunteers, right? Like that's a lot of kind of people engaging and figuring out how to navigate all that. You know, as a teacher, I just had a lot of respect and kind of awe for their ability to do a lot and make a lot happen for a lot of people, and also for the research area, but still be very, just very approachable, very engaged with, like, you know, the student who's just learning this stuff for the first time. And, you know, to just get to see Phil, like when we went on the one, I think that one was in Edmonton, but just, yeah, these students were basically this was their summer course, right? And so they weren't grad students, or, you know, this was like their first kind of experience. And to see that passion as a teacher, like I think for me that, yeah, I just found them really inspiring and something that I would want to live up to in my own life as a teacher and artist, and the things that we do and the way that they give so much. And yeah, not just about, you know, the dinosaur discovery, but the whole package. For me, that was inspiring. Made me want to try beyond, like, makes me want to try harder and do better, do more. And also that they were doing it for so long, right? Like to see them to still maintain that kind of commitment when they're like pushing 70.
Yeah.
You know, that's what you kind of hope for, right? And to still have that spark of just wonder, you know, it's amazing. It's really, you think, you know, that's a life worth living.
Absolutely. We think that all the time too. And yeah, they are awesome. Very, very inspiring couple for sure. Yeah.
I mean, and that this is why Tara should answer the questions, because that was good. You know, I'm like, darn it all, I would have gone on a tangent, but yeah, I just say ditto.
Great. Well, I'm gonna put the link to the documentary in the chat again for people,
just in case anybody missed it.
I think we're out of time now, but is there a place for people if they want to go, especially if you have future documentaries coming out, kind of keep up to date with that?
Yeah, well, we have the site, and I'm trying to keep maintaining it. It's you know, it's tough when you have a day job, but it's at followthebones.com is the for the documentary. And
then what's your site?
Mine
is,
if
we have other documentaries, it would be on Terry's.
It's terryoneil.work, and it's terryoneil.work. And yeah, we have some other stuff there. But yeah, you know, I definitely want to thank you for hosting this, and I want to, you know,
thanks for everyone for coming to watch it and staying to chat. And you know, again, I've been to those lectures where there's just a handful of people, so it's amazing. Yeah. So we just really appreciate, you taking the time.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Awesome.
Well, enjoy the rest of your Saturday, everybody.
Yeah, and keep us posted if you ever do another dinosaur thing.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right, thanks.
All right, bye-bye, everybody.